long days and pleasant nights. Welcome back to another episode of Walk Along the Beams. We're still here talking about the Talisman, our part three on this fantastic book that we're talking about. I'm gonna introduce my buddy here, my brother Steve. How you doing tonight, Steve? You ready to do this?
That's a thick ass book, but we're getting through it.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it's because we
And
had such a great conversation about it. Like, I mean, we probably could have banged this off in a couple of episodes.
you know, I've sat here at home and I've tried to like figure out how to speed this up or my bios to no, each chapter is just there's a lot of information that happens like step for step. And like,
Oh,
yes, we are having, detailed conversations, but like I mean, first off, that's the point of me doing this. But second off, it's just how detailed, thick each individual chapters. Because I mean, just looking at it, and I went back and looked at Salem's Lot and how that was formatted, and it's just this book is completely. I mean, we're talking about in one part he gets up to like chapter 36 or something like that, which is kind of ridiculous. Usually he breaks them off at like, let's say 20 or something like that.
and it's
Um,
deceitful because the paperbacks, the printing's so much smaller. But if you see the hardbacks, I mean, they're thick.
it's a thick
It's
boy.
getting
It's
up
a
into
thick boy.
Tommyknocker thickness there. Like,
Yeah, it
holy
is. It
crap, eh?
is. So, to inform everybody where we left off exactly at part three, which is incidentally, we're on part three. But part three, collision of worlds. What is this? Chapter, I think it says 2.0, taken by the law. Um, so we're basically gonna jump right in it like normal. I'm gonna do my little bios, and I got questions fitted throughout. If you're watching this on the rewind or if you're watching this currently live, I will touch base with you as you pop in. If you have any questions, sling them at us. Don't be
Yeah,
afraid to
absolutely.
pipe in. I'm looking for that live, feedback. All right, let's get into it. So we basically our last chapter we had Jack in a box, fitting situation. He's trying to prevent himself from dying, being eaten by this werewolf. His buddy that changed into a werewolf survived it by locking the herd into the shed. So in this chapter, we kind of start back with that scene. They sleep until about noon. They head out, and then they're at the border of Daleville. They head to a Burger King. Jack cleans up in a bathroom while Wolf waits outside. Jack orders two Whoppers. He starts to eat his, and he sees some kids crowded around Wolf. Heads outside and gives his Whopper to Wolf, who eats the Whopper box and all. Um,
Yeah,
that that explains why the kids were watching Wolf. Not only does his appearance kind of look a little weird, but he just doesn't know how we do things. And Jack did not explain how we eat this thing, and so he just assumed it's like a piece of fruit. Um, I actually love this scene. I had to go back and like read and make sure I heard that right. Yeah, but he eats the box, and again, it's
yeah,
like
I remember that.
it's soft cardboard. It's not. um,
But you figure
all right.
the smell of it would have made him hesitate on that. But I guess it's wood pulp, right? Or because the old
He
boxes, we're talking back in what, the 70s or eight,
he thinks we're in the 80s, but he
in
thinks
the 80s.
everything smells bad. Like I think the
Yeah.
only times he ever said anything smelled good was when he was a wolf, and that was because he was mainly smelling just fresh meat everywhere.
It's a
Um,
good thing it wasn't McDonald's because I think they had styrofoam back then because I was working there at the time and we had
yeah,
a
they did.
styrofoam. He would have
They
been
did.
eating the styrofoam.
Oh, he would have figured it out then. All right, so a man sitting in his car. Bill Buck Tompkins offers them a ride, which is in an El Camino. It has a bed, so Wolf doesn't necessarily have to ride inside the car, which we know he freaks out in cars, kind of thing.
Is it a car
Um,
or is it a truck? I don't know. It's both.
it's both. I love El Camino.
I know they're
Buck,
so
Tur-
cool.
yeah, they are because they're versatile. They work as a truck and a car.
Exactly, especially when you have the older front ends on them.
And weird, they don't drive like a car. They drive like a little mini pickup truck. It was kind of cool. Um, so Buck turns out to be a farmer. He gives Jack a joint as a just in case he needs to calm down Wolf again because Wolf was kind of excited outside the Burger King kind of thing. They make it to Chattanooga. We hear of the Sunlight Home. As soon as they cross city lines, a cop car appears and chases them out, turns around and comes back for them, asking what their story is. With a scripted story, Jack tries to talk, but the cop is drawn to Wolf. Not believing them, he starts to put them in the back seat, but Wolf freaks out, and the cop has to use a billy jack and knocks out Wolf. They're loaded up and taken away during the trip. Jack swallows the joint. Um,
Now it's inedible.
yeah, basically worried that they were going to find it, which they wouldn't have. We find out later on. Said only to be detained, but they are taken to a building where they meet Judge Fairchild. Jack uses the scripted story um, when they're taken. I lost my name, to
Yeah,
Judge Fairchild, and they started. They state that Wolf was his cousin named Jack Wolf, but his real name was Philip. States he is slow. Taking Wolf back to his mom in Springfield. Says they are sorry for ditching. The judge explains that due to age and being alone, they can't be allowed to continue on their journey without their parents. So told they would be held at the Sunlight Home for Wayward Kids, led by Sonny Gardner. Um, they head into another cop car and head out to the Sunlight Homes. Um, Set around farmland, the Sunlight Home has a fence surrounding the building. The cop explains all was built by the Wayward children that lived there, kind of thing. Um, and that's where this chapter leaves off. And folks, we are going to get into some dark territory tonight. Some of it is some of the best dark territories I've ever witnessed with King.
yeah.
Um,
It was
I
so
mean,
disturbing that I almost wanted to stop reading the book. So that tells you how much of a good writer he is, because I was getting so disturbed by this whole section of it that, yeah, I wanted to quit.
it's pretty trippy, and especially the many directions that it could go, the direction that it eventually does take. It definitely keeps, especially if you've never read this section, and it's a long section. It's not just one chapter; it's many chapters that make up this one section of the book.
Yeah,
Specifically called the Sunlight, Homes section or whatever. Um, but I mean, it's so unnerving, especially because you have to remind yourself you're dealing with a young kid in the middle of like rural America at this point. That the way the cop picked him up is kind of reminiscent out of a lot of those old slasher, 70, not a good cop scenario type of thing. So I do have a question related to this chapter, and I wanted to pick your brain on it. But in this chapter, we have them helped by a hippie when they were at Burger King, but eventually captured by the law. What do you
I
think
know.
King or Straub was trying to imply by this? Where it
The,
was,
from
I,
what was happening back in the day there with the long arm of the law and hippies.
yeah,
See, I don't think there was any correlation between those two. I mean, because by the time the hippie left them, they were walking for some time before the cop found out about that. But I think it's more about what the cops are doing in the South at that time, in that age, with wayward kids and throwing them into these homes and stuff. Did
yeah.
you
Well,
almost want to dump this book after that, or skip past that chapter? How did you get through this one?
it's
That's
tough,
what I
and
want to pick your brain on.
it it doesn't get good for me until the end of the Sunlight Home, especially if you've already read this and you know what's coming. This is, especially as far as Talisman goes, this part of the book is fairly memorable.
Okay,
It's
so
not
you kind of just like left it out of your brain, kind of deal.
No, I mean, I remembered it kind of thing, and it was more like this part was drudging on, and you have to remember when I'm breaking it down, I'm, I have to go back and listen to this like usually 3, 4 times to catch everything. So most of these chapters, it takes me quite a bit to actually have a real time like number on how like if you read at regular speed, how long these chapters are versus like how long it takes me to break them down. It's usually like if a chapter is like 30 minutes, it could be like an hour and 30 minutes, an hour for me. Um, I'm not a fan of this section. It's not, but he tended to focus on this material during this time, and I can say from experience in America that it's still something that's very much around today. Um, so I can him picking real horror elements. This is definitely like, one of those real horror elements that exist out there, especially if you ever plan to run away or um but it just goes into this show of like Jack not really, understanding the world as an adult would kind of thing versus a boy.
Yeah, I
um
remember my parents saying, like, if you ran away, that they would catch you and they'd put you in these schools. They always threatened us as children with this kind of thing, and we didn't think it was real. But reading this afterwards, you find out, yeah,
they
not only is it
they're
real, but these places sucked.
they are very much real, and they do very much suck. At this time, I know that I'm not sure about Straub, but knowing King and his history and stuff like that, I do know that he was like anti-government, anti-law at this time. So I want to assume that's why the comparison between like this hippie was the one that like helped him out, and then he dropped him off, and then they're picked up and instantly like manhandled by the law kind of thing. Um,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and I wanted to say hi. Hey, what's up, Kenneth? Thanks for stopping
Hey,
by.
Kenneth.
All right, well, let's move along because even though most of these chapters are on a level kind of suck, there is a beautiful payoff at the end of this.
Yes, there is.
Um,
And I was so thrilled with that when that all happened. I was like, yes, finally.
yeah,
Because I know he
it
paints this
does.
morose picture, and you're like, holy shit. I wonder.
Yeah,
And you know what I was thinking through this whole chapter is, what's the territories look like from their perspective? Because, every time they flip to the territories, it's something dark and evil, like with the bar. It was the same thing. It was kind of some horrible tavern. So I was thinking, what the hell was the flip side to this the whole
well,
time I read it?
I can say we do get to see bits and pieces of what this is, and we know out of context what this place is, but we never officially get to like see it in its grand scope kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I constantly, as I'm reading this book, especially when I originally read this book, I kept wondering what that version of our world would have looked over there. And that could have been when he was at the mall, at Burger King. It's just that concept is really super interesting to me, and how it's not just an alternate reality. That there's physical changes there. Um,
Yeah. The territories is a complete different geography.
and especially what the Sunlight Home represents in our world. Like you have to imagine that it'd be something kind of
Horrible.
way worse. Yeah, especially because you find out who it's connected to, and it does have uses kind of thing, in the main cog of things. All right, so chapter 21, the Sunlight Home. Speaking of which, um, as they pull into the fence, they see kids working in the fields. They're taken inside and they meet Reverend Sonny Gardner, told they're vagrants. Sonny meets Jack first and notices Jack is a little stoned. Wolf still dazed from his head blow. During their introduction, Jack gets an image of a whip and knows Sonny is Osmond's twinner. At this exact moment, Sonny asks Jack if they have met before. Jack states no, and Sonny says he doesn't forget faces. They are taken inside by a it's a Hector Bast. Basically a guard. They're taken in first to registration, and then they get new clothes, and then after registration they're told that they are wards of the state, told they're scheduled to work, that they have to kind of like pay off their living kind of thing. um, they will basically go to work, church, eat on a daily basis. That's kind of their schedule, except for Sunday, of course. They rest on Sunday, kind of. There's caveats to that. um, Told that they do get paid 50 cents, per hour, basically $5 a day, $30 a week. They're also told of kids allowed to work off site, um, passing out flyers and such, promoting the sunny home type
The
thing.
brainwashing church.
Mhm. They go through Jack's and Wolf's pockets and backpack, thinking they're holding drugs, but find nothing but normal gear. Wolf has some matches and three colored stones. taking upstairs, and Singer and Bass hits Jack due to him feeling mocked since Jack and Wolf have no drugs, giving new clothes and sees the inner building. It is basically a prison. Taken to room and locked inside. Told all their belongings are kept safe in an office separate from where they'll be. Wolf tells Jack that they can't stay there due to it being a bad place, due to the white man, and Wolf confirms Sonny is Osmond. Jack wonders if Sonny knows Jack or if it's a game. They go to sleep dreaming dark thoughts, and that's where that chapter leaves off. And real quick, I'm going to say hi to Bedazzle. Thanks for showing up, Bedazzle. Sorry I couldn't say hi when first popped in. But I do have a couple questions and a little story, you know. So, my first question is, what were your original thoughts of this man, Sonny Gardner? You know, what was your first impressions, especially um, getting to meet Stephen King villains? How did this one line up on the scale of his villains?
Oh, he lined up really good right off the top, man. As soon as I saw this guy, I thought of all those cult leaders that we'd
Yeah,
seen, but
John Koresh
specifically,
and
yeah, I was thinking of our
the
man
other
with the
guy.
swastika on his forehead there. The hell,
I know who you're talking about. I'm not forgetting his name, but
yeah, from way, way back. But he kind of, a maniac, psychopath, kind of like that right off the bat. I'm like, holy shit, this guy is bad news. So
I
this
mean, they
place is
do.
going to be pretty horrible, and they're going to get the shit beat out of them.
Within context, they do directly like reference many different cult occasions because they do reference like the Koresh, they do reference like the
Manson, that's it.
yeah Manson, they reference
Charles Manson.
the other guy.
Yeah,
No, but
David
the
Koresh was a big one too. Yeah,
yeah, the Kool Aid, you know.
yeah, everyone
Um,
drink the Kool Aid. People still joke about that crap. But man, good villain though, because I think even Stephen King kind of modeled it after these type of people. You know,
yeah. So that leads me into this. So this whole scene reminds me of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and part Deliverance. You know, why was this a
Deliverance.
huge trope? Why was this a huge trope in the 80s and 90s of families or towns working to achieve the most heinous of things? Because, you know, while reading this specific chapter and the whole setup of everything, the cop grabbing him, you know, because the cop just could have taken him to a sheriff's station and I could have said, it reminds me of Desperate. No,
Yeah,
this right here reminds me of some Hills Have Eyes, Texas Chainsaw, because it's like this. You find out it's this huge organization of people working together to get these kids, you know,
yeah,
out here to the sunny home because they make money off them. They basically almost live and die there. We find out a bunch of the
yeah.
kids do die there.
It's a plantation. It's a slave labor force, is what it is,
Yeah.
and they're doing it within the law because these
Why?
kids are like orphans, right?
Why was this such like this huge thing? Now I get, you know, and growing up, I thought Texas Chainsaw Massacre was like history because like growing up in Texas, it was talked about outside the movie, like, oh, you know, it happened up north, you know. And come to
Everybody
find
has
out,
an
it's
urban legend.
yeah, come to find out, it's not, you know, it's
It
not.
never
And it was,
happened.
you know, parts of it based on some other stuff, but nowhere near Texas. But um, no, but it was like this huge thing in the 80s and 90s of these like, you know, horrible people working together to achieve these things. But it was mainly seen in movie and TVs. You know,
Yeah, it was.
I wouldn't say I saw a lot of it in books, but as I'm reading this, I'm like, why was this a trope back then? Why was this? You know, maybe it goes into the cults. You know, people fearing that their kids would get into cult. You know, because I can remember the D&D thing had that tied to it. That you know, if you played
Yeah, yeah.
D&D, it was like you were getting into a cult for the devil and stuff like that. So maybe it, you know,
I'm
uh,
bringing light to like up here in Canada, the residential schools, and that was a big horrible thing too, right?
ours is the public.
Yep.
No, I thought it was, you know, I mean, because it's exactly what this whole, you know, and I hate to call it a trope, but by this time, and you know, maybe at this time when the book was came out, it wasn't a trope, and now it certainly is. You know, this ongoing horror trope of these, you know, evil
Yep.
people getting together. And then on top of this, it's got to be this like religious figure that's the main bad guy. You know, it
Or
couldn't be.
using religion in an evil way, right?
Yeah, because even Wolf picks up on it, like and early on about how, this version of like, or not this version, but Christianity inside this novel, is used in the most heinous of ways when, he grew up with the good book and the good book just teaches the exact opposite. And you're thinking, why isn't the Bible like that and taught like that? Um,
And it's kind of a double edge too, because they're also using whatever law was available in the South in that time. So
yeah,
that
that
it was
too.
not only using religion, but they're also using the law. So they had two things that they were manipulating and perverting.
Yeah, because this whole thing wasn't just a cop that. No, I mean, we're talking about they had judges and attorneys, and
Yeah, like the whole
you
town
know,
was corrupt. Like everything was corrupt from top to bottom. They had their place locked up. It kind of reminds me of Stillwater. Remember that comic book out?
yeah,
They
uh,
have themselves completely isolated from the rest of America. You come in, you don't get out.
yeah. I want to admit that like Jack is just, even though he's called like traveling Jack or whatever, he's not a good traveler because he just, I mean, yeah, he's hitching and everything, but there's certain things you're supposed to avoid while you're hitching, especially at that age, and
I know, but he's
cops
a
would.
kid. He doesn't know. He's an idiot,
Well,
right?
no,
Because of
even
his
at
age.
even as a kid, you just knew to avoid, especially if you were already doing something bad, you could you jumped into a bush and you hid from that cop,
Yeah, I know,
you
but he was
took
a rich, privileged kid thrown into that life, and he was really new at it, and he was still stupidly trusting. See,
this
now
shows.
if he grew up in that environment, then absolutely, I would agree he would know this stuff. But being a privileged kid, being in hotels and catered to all the time, private school, like fuck, he doesn't know that shit, and he's still trusting.
You're
So he's an
exactly right
idiot.
because I mean he goes through and he suffers from it because he
Yes, he
doesn't even
does.
realize. I mean, we just got out of this one situation at the bar, and now he's going right back into the same damn situation, but 10 times worse.
So he's a
Um,
slow learner.
yeah, yeah. Poor Jack.
I can relate to him in that regard too. I was
I
slow at
can, I
picking
can.
up stupid.
So let's find out a little more about this Sunny home. So chapter 22, the sermon. At 5 p.m., a bell sounds, and this is still the same day. Wakes both Jack and Wolf up. Wolf freaks out due to the loud bells. The bells are from confession time, and all the kids are ushered to this church. As they travel, Jack notices hidden mics and cameras that are placed throughout the Sunny home. Jack also notices that most of the boys are excited for confession. Sonny only asks for a dozen confessions, and most of all want to confess something. Jack notices that the kids gain favor with Sonny through confessions. Sonny comes to Jack and wanting Jack to confess to Sonny about him knowing Sonny previously. And you're going to hear this constantly.
Yeah.
It's a drone.
It's over
Um,
and over and over. Mhm.
Yes, it not only was like a pain in the butt to read, but it's a pain in the butt to like rewrite.
It,
Okay, and I
it,
can
it didn't
imagine.
scream really of Stephen King at the time, did it?
No, because it's just like iteration of iteration. And I know he's like
He doesn't
anti.
repeat like that. He tells you once, and
Yo,
okay, you got to figure it out.
yeah, he and if you haven't figured it out by that point, he'll just hold your hand and he'll be like, "Come this way, dang it." Um, okay, so uh, okay, to confess to Sonny about him knowing Sonny previously, Jack still answers no, but he throws in a snide remark and is hit so hard he is flung backwards and slams his head into the hard floor. Wolf goes to protect Jack, and Jack commands him not to. They had they go to dinner. Next, while at dinner, Jack mind his head. He basically starts thinking of escape, and he tries like scanning the area that they're in, kind of thing. And he eyes the kitchen as a possibility. He also notices a guard that smokes that could be bribed. They eat and head to the night chapel. The chapel is set up to record for TV and radio. Sonny comes onto a stage and gives a ceremony from Psalms 37. And for those of y'all that don't know, that is fret not thyself because of evil doers. Um, With Sonny's explanation of the psalm is not to be afraid to talk about the Lord. Sonny explains the Sunlight Home is not a place for evildoers, explains the home has enemies, the state trying to shut down the Sunlight Home. Sonny explains they scare these groups away, mention the territories are being sent out to be. He mentions the territories and then mentioning these people being sent out to be eaten by beasts, and then eventually they pray. And that last part was actually like kind of verbatim, but he says it in a biblical sense. So, and the Bible does talk about territories, beasts, and some evildoers. So you take it as what you will, but as we learn later on, yeah, he's definitely talking about the territories. He's talking about, I mean, and you talk about one of the coolest things to set up though, and the way they have it set up, right? So it's this group that's not necessarily kidnapping boys, but they are. Then they're using them for slave labor, and then they, on different levels, they recruit them, at airports and stuff like that, encourage them to run away. And then they're brought into this like home that's resembled as like this religious like house of learning, which it is not. It's,
It's
I
a
mean,
cult.
yeah, I read you. Oh, it's horrible. Like, and it's so fascinating how it works in this world because once you find out he's connected to the territories and he's using like the territories to just dispose of hidden bodies, and I will say there's some issues with that at when we get to the end of it. But I did love, as we're going through this, seeing the setup and then seeing the Stephen King parts of it play out, kind of thing. Um, No questions there, though.
Yeah, it was a good
Any,
scene. It was
yeah,
a
I
hell
mean,
of a setup.
yeah, setting up this whole house, and I mean, I think religion could be taken like either or. It can be seen as like you could use it in very scary situations with the right type of people, kind of thing.
Hmm.
I mean, he's done this previously. One of his biggest book ever is Carrie, and that
Yep.
half
The
of the
mother,
book
holy
is yeah,
cow.
is the
Yeah.
mom.
She was a fanatic.
Mhm. All right, so chapter 23, Fur Janklo. Jack and Wolf are outside for their work time. Jack, thinking of Wolf and his mom, decides the work yard would be the best way to escape if he could flip. He decides to attempt this, where one of the other boys, Fred Jakin, actually does try this. He takes off and tries to escape.
Hmm.
We learn confessions are canceled that night, and Fred Janklow is nowhere around. And at this time, we don't know if his escape was successful or he's just, he could be dead. We don't know.
Yep.
But he's not. Don't worry. Um, so Jack, not knowing how they punish kids, thinks Sonny killed, uh, Fur Janklow. Jack also notices that Wolf looks more animalistic, even though he just changed on the full moon and he knows it's not time for another full moon. He does start kind of noticing that he looks like he's changing again. Um, Jack remembers a moment when Ferd explains the box in the yard where Sonny locks up kids. Also, that Sonny spied on the kids and how the Sunlight Home operates in a shadow line within the state. While Jack is deep in thought, a guard smacks Jack, Hector Bass, and then provokes Wolf. Sonny walks in and observes this. Hector gets in a good roundhouse punch, and I love this. But Wolf literally grabs his second attempted roundhouse punch, breaking bones in his hands first, and then in his wrist, and then all the way down his arm with just grabbing it. I love that. Just the immense stock. Oh my God. Um, so Wolf saying, "You don't hurt the herd." Jack stops this, and Wolf is detained. Wolf is thrown in the box. Wolf howling and yelling for almost a day. Sonny states Wolf can come out if Jack reveals how they know each other. Jack goes to work and comes back to find Wolf has been taken out of the box and is waiting in their room. Jack notices Wolf is dying, and noticing Wolf starting changing more in the box explains this can happen outside of a full moon. They cry, they rest, and eventually they go to sleep, and this is where this chapter ends. Um, I do have a question on this, and it kind of pertains to that last thing that was close to the end of the chapter. So, can we talk about adding on to an established, already major mythos at this time, right? And in my eyes, kind of a cool addition because I have a very strong understanding of lycanthropy and werewolves, and um, this was brand new. And I can remember reading this as like a teenager. I was like, "Oh shit, this is dope!" Like, okay, so, and the explanation of this, and it only works in extreme situations, but if you trick an already humanized werewolf into believing that where it's dark enough and they get despaired enough and they're not eating, they in their head trick themselves out to think they're going through a full moon, and they literally can start changing back into a werewolf. Now, for context, he's not supposed to do this for like another 8 months or something like this from this moment or something like that. Don't quote me on the time frame. It could be like 6 or 8. It's supposed to be a long time before he changes back to a werewolf. So they're laying in heavy to, this lead box. How do you feel about, adding on to an extended, an already established mytho?
Yeah, with Dungeons and Dragons, I think the lycanthropes, they can change at will at one point, So I mean, they can just kind of add on to whatever from legend from here, and then join that one together. So when they're stressed or agitated, they can change as well. So I mean, there's like you said, there's exceptions to it, and that was like more of the pure blood ones, that were able to control their change, and they could change at will. And we've actually seen that in some movies too. Some movies did the same thing where they actually had them, they could change whenever they wanted to. The
Oh yeah, yeah.
Howling, when I was a kid, the Howling scared the living crap out
I
of me.
love the Howling. The
Yeah,
Howling is,
that
I
was the
mean,
most well done
you talk
transformation that
about
I had ever
graph.
seen at the time.
Me too, all the way up until maybe a couple of years ago, but that was the ultimate, like, that's what in my mind a werewolf would look like if they,
Yeah, that scene when
um,
he picked up the girl when he changed and he had her, and
yes.
like, holy shit! Like I was
And
peeing
that
my pants,
that
man.
reminds me a lot of this Wolf versus Hector Bass. I
Yeah,
mean, I love that Bass goes in, and granted, Wolf does not look like a werewolf. I mean, he's still humanized. He's a very
yeah, but
tall,
he's a
big.
person from the territory, so he already looks odd because we've
Yeah,
seen that with Jay Lee, how he drew them in the Gunslinger books. The humans in the territories or in Midworld don't look the same. They're off just enough to make the people on our side notice that, wait a minute, something's wrong with you, but I can't lay my finger on what's wrong with you. So I think it's the same kind of idea with the territories, where even in their human form, they look a little weird. They look off. They don't look like us. And then with him being a werewolf on top of it, just adds to it.
it's kind of really ironic, right? Because into this book, and we're presented with the situation with Jack along his journey, where he gets to the bar situation. And then King and Peter want to do it all over again
Yeah.
with the Sunny thing. And it's like, well, how do we do it differently? And we throw a werewolf in the mix. That's how we're going to motherfucking do it different, right?
Yep.
We're going to throw, and it's exactly the yin and yang that you get out of both versions. Because if you can go back to that bar scene, and if Jack would have, I mean, if Wolf would have been there with Jack, he never would have got hit past that first time, kind of thing. And, it's kind of a fantastic version because you don't normally get this within TV, movies, or novels where you get multiple versions of how a scene plays out with just adding in a character, kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, but I would say this is where this whole Sunlight Home finally started to get good, you know, um, because I will say a lot of this is extremely sad. This is like, coming up, this is like a lot of Stephen King fans, like most hated moments within all his novels.
I know it was
Um,
stressful reading this stuff because, again, at the same time, you got to remember the primary narrative of this book. This kid's got to get the talisman, and time
Yeah.
is a wasting, and it seems like
And
holy shit, this guy
we're
just
talking
keeps
about,
wasting lots of
yeah,
time.
we're
Like, he
talking
was
about
there for how long? Was he
how
in that home?
long is this
Months.
freaking journey? It's like,
Like,
you know,
jeez.
that's another thing as we're going through it. I keep reminding myself that we are traveling with the kid and stuff like that. But a lot of time it's like, God, would you just move along? Like, what are you doing? You know, you're moving from city to city, boy. You need to be moving state to state. You know, like, um, but all this is prescribed and answered within the book. You know, within the realm of, you know, I mean, and there are small explanations, you know, kind of thing. Why he can't fly? Why he can't do
Yeah.
this? Um,
Well, he was even told at the start to stay over in the territories as much as possible because it'll move. He'll move faster.
which I can remember the first time I kept as I was reading this, you know, and I kept expecting him to follow through with that. And he just never really does.
No,
And it's
it's
like,
like he
why
did
didn't
the
you
opposite.
listen? Yeah, and all his troubles really ail from our world.
Yes.
But I can relate that, you know, because I don't know about you, but growing up, I just had this happy-go-lucky outlook on the world up until a certain age.
Yep.
And then you realize, you know, that you know, not only is the world pretty plain, but not only that, but not everything is so happy-go-lucky kind of thing, depending
Yeah.
on
It can
where
be
you
dark.
are. And
Very dark.
yeah, you know, and he does that so well in this book, and you know, using those motifs with Jack, especially because you know, re- mentioned, you know, him being homeschooled and him being a, you know, kind of protected kid. Let's
Exactly.
just say. Um, all right, so let's move along because we got some good stuff. Um, in chapter 24, Jack names the planets. A week has passed. Ferd claiming salvation and is allowed to leave. There's a brief thing where at this time we didn't know what had happened to Ferd, and then all of a sudden he just shows up in the chapel the next day, and he literally is just praying for salvation with Sonny. And after that, we're told that his parents come and take him away. None of this is seen firsthand besides Jack seeing Ferd in that chapel, but none of the parent stuff is seen firsthand. Um, let's see. Um, leaving Wolf and Jack, you know, after Ferd leaves, they basically they were kind of at the point where they were bonding at this point. He had like a friend, you know, Ferd was giving him advice. Most of the stuff Jack already knew the stuff that Ferd was telling him, but it was just more like just somebody to talk to and relate to, that kind of stuff. They both had the same mindset because they were both trying to escape and get the F out of there versus all the other boys who were just trying to kiss up to Sonny for whatever reasons. But let's see. Um, so Ferd leaves Wolf and Jack without his friend. Hector Bass still pissed at Wolf, and this is like the preceding next day, but blames Jack for his arm. Was scared after the event, but after seeing Wolf emerge from the box, he isn't and tries hitting Jack, but Jack dodges away. Eventually, Sonny appears and they go back to their rooms. In their room, Wolf tells Jack they need to leave soon or Wolf will die, getting confirmation not just from Jack's own like perceptive that he thinks Wolf is dying. No, now Wolf is telling him that he's dying. Later, while Wolf sleeps, Jack runs into Sonny, who is asking for a confessional, to which Jack claims the same story. This time, Sonny hits him and uses a lighter to burn the info out, to which Jack says maybe California. He still doesn't give him any answer. Ultimately, he never does. Um, Jack is because we the readers know how Sonny and Jack know each other. All throughout this, Jack does not. He has not made the correlation. Now he knows who. Eventually, he recognizes who Sonny's twinner is, but he has not made. And we, the readers, know that Sonny tried to kidnap him when he was like a little kid, and he
Yeah.
was just so young that he's not recognized in the face, but Sonny is. Sonny's, and that's what he's referring to is the time that Sonny and a couple guys, Elroy and somebody else, tried to kidnap him, and it wasn't
Yeah.
just one occasion; it was twice that he tried and failed.
Yep. And we find out why too.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, you think that the kid that you tried to kidnap and failed not once but twice. You think you'd remember, and especially it hasn't been that long a time. 6 to 12 is, I mean,
Kid
six
will still
years,
look
but
basically the same. I mean, they usually
yeah,
lose a little bit, but yeah,
yeah. All right, so all of this is really just Sonny's fault. Okay,
of course.
um, let me see. We were at the lighter, and he's
Oh,
burning
sure
our
enough.
dude Jack. Yeah, I lost my place. Okay, burns the info out of him, to which Jack says, maybe California. Jack is taken back to his room. Next day, a cook named Randolph warns Jack, and we've kind of already met Randolph before. That was the smoker that I mentioned previously. He warns Jack that Sonny and Bass are eyeing Jack and Wolf, and in the past, this pretty much means death, or the kids just disappear, kind of thing. Once Bass and Sonny take like a special interest in a kid, that's usually what it means. Jack has noticed this and asks if the cook can look the other way so they can use the kitchen to escape, but the cook will not go against Sonny due to an event where this Randolph guy believes Sonny is working for the devil, or he'd be some kind of ghost or something like that, and he believes he has like supernatural powers. So it's really like some bad juju that's preventing. Um, but Jack knows that Sonny is flipping, kind of thing. This is kind of around the time when he figures out this dude Sonny's, you know, because there's a lot of clues to this point that, for Jack, because us as the reader, we're told pretty much who Sonny's, twinner is. We know. It takes Jack a little bit, some time to figure that out. He has to get
Yeah.
all these like context clues. Um, the next morning, which I think the instant you meet Sonny, I knew who it,
Like
I don't even think,
immediately with the
yeah, because
description of
they,
them.
yeah,
Yeah.
because they use the, like, when he talked, they use a term like whiplashing or something like that, like, and I was like, oh, I know exactly
Oh,
this.
we know the guy with the whip on the territories, the lunatic.
um, right. And this was not a word that was narrated. That's a word that Jack uses, so that should have been Jack's term of reference to place who this was. Um, Sonny is okay. So the next morning, Sonny demands another confession, this time assaulting Jack's jewels, let's just say, and demands he confess by the next night. Jack claims he and Wolf will be gone by tomorrow night, and basically he's threatening to cut off Jack's junk if you don't, admit to how they know each other, kind of thing. And kind of at this point, even though Jack knows who his twinner is, he still doesn't know how he knows Sonny, so he can't really answer that kind of thing. Um, so I do have a couple questions, and more like question slash story. Okay, so why is Sonny so persistent with Jack and remembering? Okay, now either or, like, okay, so we know the story. He tried to kidnap Jack and failed. Okay, so there's one way you can look at it where he doesn't exactly know Jack and he does remember his face and he's generally looking for an answer, which Jack could say a whole bunch of different things because this guy actually gives him context clues. He actually mentions locations. That's the reason Jack throws out California. Okay, so or it could go the other way, where Sonny knows exactly who this is. What's with the game?
Yeah,
So why
I'm
is
betting
he
it's
so pers-
I'm betting it's a combination of both. Like it's a little bit of him remembering this kid, but I think what the problem is he knows that the kid is with the mother, and he's a rich, privileged kid. So why the frig would this kid be wandering the damn streets and end up in his facility? And it's like he knows that it's the kid, but at the same time, his brain is going, "There's no freaking way this kid could possibly be here." So it could be one of those situations. Like why would this kid be wandering around by himself when he's got his rich mom?
that was the only thing that I could think of. Like the first time I read it was like it was a money related thing, and he was assuming that this was like a richer kid that he was letting on to because in his story, he relates it that they're kind of poor, they're backwatered kind of thing. That's why they're traveling the distance that they have to travel, like due to some of his family members losing jobs and this and that. So I want to assume it's like that's the way I assumed it was. Later on, we find out kind of completely different, and we just find out Sonny's just kind of dumb. Um, but I still want to believe that he could be playing the game. Um, and I'm going to explain exactly why we know he's dumb because it's kind of worded out, and that I know is a Stephen King thing.
But
Um,
he's an amazing sharpshooter, though.
yeah, yeah.
He's a
So,
crack shot, but he's an idiot.
so I do have a very personal story that I will relate to the Sunny Home thing because I have personal experience with a very similar store, place just like Sunny Home. So when I I left home very early on, and I don't want to use the term run away because I ran away a couple times, but I came back home. Um, Officially, I left home at a very early age. I actually like finished high school while I was on the streets, kind of thing. Um, it was all half choice and not half choice. I'm not going to go into the reasons behind that, but part of it went into I wanted to be like my own man kind of thing, self-made person. I didn't want to have to rely on the backs of others or that kind of thing. And a lot of it was me being naive as a kid. And I already I was already working early on, so I already had established money. Um, I attempted to do this for like, let's say, I got 2 years into it because eventually this was completed. I got my life back on track, and but specifically talking about the homeless part of my life, where I was walking the streets just like Jack per se. And eventually it got to the point, like 2 years into it, where I burned all the bridges I could, ran out of all the lines I could, use for help, that kind of thing. So I eventually went back to my family, and this was my mom's answer of helping me out, was she took me to a place that was just like the Sunny Home, except it was called the Covenant House. This is something you can physically look up if you know where I'm from. But the
Mhm.
Covenant House was exactly like this. It was a like chain linked barbed wire, complex. We were forced to go to, church. We could leave the compound, regardless if we had school outside or work. We were basically, and once we were there, it was just basically church and these work projects that they had us do. Um, Now, unlike Jack, my story at the Covenant House only lasted a day because I came up with the plan like instantly. I had to get the F out of there once I figured out like what the F was going on because they had mentioned a couple things. Because at the time, I had a job, I was going to school, and I had a current girlfriend where I couldn't just stay in a building for another couple years until until I turned 18 or whatever. Yeah, so I couldn't do that. So I instantly fled that night, and I did some, having to jump over some barbed wire, and it didn't take me a whole day to figure out exactly how I do it. No, I want to say like first 30 minutes, like after they mentioned those couple of things, like you're not going to be allowed to leave. I was like,
What?
escape route right there.
Uh-huh. You started the
Um,
wheels were a turning, but that's
but
a
I can
different story for you versus Jack.
Yeah, it was. But I can attest that the food was not good. I mean, they did feed us, they did clothe us. I mean, I'm not gonna, say it was the ultimate worst, but I can say that that was my first experience with a myth that I thought was a myth. And the green eggs and ham, I thought was like a children's tale until I went there, and they literally had green eggs and ham, and not food coloring, green eggs and
Oh,
ham.
oh,
They came out of a can, and they were processed
oh,
together. I was like,
yikes!
"What?" When I saw that, that blew my mind. And I'd seen some pretty low, Americanized foods. I grew up on beanie weenies and hot dog and bologna and um,
KD and cheese, baby. KD and cheese.
yeah, you know what I'm saying. No, so I want to say I don't know how he researched this or how but this depiction of this. I mean, you're talking about me reading this brought back like really bad memories. And I'm not going to say I'm traumatized or anything like that, but how descriptive and realistic this place was just in a visual fiction novel. It's pretty accurate. I mean, the way the guards were, the way the other kids were, I mean, that's exactly my experience at this other place, just minus the werewolves and flipping to other territories. I wish it would have had some werewolves or flipping other no.
You might have hung around.
Yeah, you know.
Look, this dude can trip into another world. Okay, I'm sticking around. We got to check this out.
Ew. All right, so we'll move on to chapter 25. So Jack and Wolf go to hell, and man, if they, you know, all right. So
Yeah, they
chapter
do.
25. So we start this chapter with Jack and Wolf discussing their escape plan. They meet in a ballroom. Now, granted, at this time we're 2 weeks into them being here.
I know. It's just killing me at this point. I'm just.
All right, discussing their escape plan. They meet in a bathroom, and Jack and Wolf attempt flipping to the territories. Finally,
Yeah.
they do, and flip directly into one of Morgan's pits. In there, they smells of sulfur and an enormous hole that to them has no end. Wolf immediately wants to leave, says it's an extremely bad place and he'll really die if they stay there. Jack sees guards herding slaves. The guards all resemble what we would describe as gargoyles. Jack sees one of the guards lash a slave so hard he breaks through his arm and slashes out his spine mid-walk. Yeah, just picture that. That person that he did that to actually turns out to be our dude, Ferd Janklow. Both seeing this, they grab for each other and they automatically flip back due to their fear of what they just saw. Not only did they just get realization that Fur did not get to go home with his family, no, that he was sent to the territories to work in this place called the Pit. And because he was slacking, he just got his spine whipped out of his, yeah.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, because basically he was walking and the guard whipped him so hard it literally went through his arm and this part and like literally pulls back. Oh man, it's like some predator type stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
All right, so
And then the guards, they resemble the kids. They're the kids that are actually in the school that are the assholes.
yeah, they
I
do.
remember they described them as.
Yeah, they are. And then later on we find. I mean, it's kind of similar to some other locations they go to later on, like the college and
Yeah,
like
where they
kind of
cross over and they see the same people as
yeah. It's
monsterish creatures.
I want to say like all the bullies or bad people that he's met along the way, like all their twinners are going to be just horrible or ghoulish
Monsters,
version.
yeah.
It's kind of an ongoing trend. Um, so they flip back. They are caught by a guard who believes they were performing a homophobic act in the
In the
bathroom
bathroom.
stall together. Sonny runs in, and this is a different Sonny, and I had to remind myself that to me this is a bad writing moment. They have two characters with the same first name. They have two Sonnies. One is a guard named Sonny Singer, and then we have our dude named Sonny Gardner. Um, so Sonny Singer, the guard, runs in and lowers his head down, like kind of talking down to Jack, and Jack basically kicks him in the chin, and starting this whole chain reaction of things, claiming he would teach him how to say hallelujah. The first time I read this, I thought this was actually Sonny Gardner, and I was like, yeah, then go Jack. No, this is just some wimpy little, like, technically all these guards, they're gonna sound like the real men. They're not. Most of these guards are just kids that have like outgrown the program and being used as guards. Bass is officially an adult, but only by a couple years. I think he's aged around like 21 to
Yeah,
26.
they're all the
All
brainwashed ones.
all the
They've
other
been
guards
fully
are.
brainwashed and fully transformed into what Sonny considers the proper attitude for this.
So it kind of explains like this Sonny running in and what he does to Jack, because he kind of runs in. He's like, "Ew, you boys touching on each other, ew," and he does this whole thing. And as he's doing it, he kind of keeps lowering himself. And Jack's like, "Well, I mean, if you're gonna put your face there, and
Kapow!
he kicks him and he flings out of the bathroom. The other guard sees it, um, so uh, So he claims me would teach him how to say hallelujah, which I love that line, after he kicks him in the face. Sonny runs away, calling for guards. Bass, using his cast, hits Jack's head, which kind of temporarily, like, it honestly does more damage to Bass than it does Jack. It comes off like where it's going to knock Jack out, but then it doesn't, and Jack just continues, and Bass is kind of taken out of the scenario because of this, because he just broke like every bone in his body the day before, and and literally broke the cast on Jack's head to do this. And
The
I
casts
guess
aren't a weapon. I mean, that thing's not
no,
that hard. It's not
I
made out of
guess,
metal or nothing. Like
and I
Jesus, the guy
guess
thinks it's
thinking,
armor.
so
That
basically,
kid's been watching too many movies, thinking that thing is something significant.
okay, so Jack in this moment realizes that the Bass was one of the Gargoyle Guards, twinners. Wolf and Jack bum rush Bass, but Jack plants his feet square in the chest, winding him. Jack and Wolf hold themselves into the bathroom, but eventually the guards overpower the two. Using syringes, Sonny sedates both of the boys, starting with Wolf. Um, I kind of hate the syringe stuff, but I saw it coming, kind of thing. I mean,
Yep.
I was surprised they hadn't like talked about it, or it just kind of comes out of this box as Sonny's talking. I will say I do love the way Sonny comes into this whole situation, like nonchalantly, like you don't give no shits, and he's just like, yeah, you try and attack me, and he just does this whole graceful ballet thing where he sidesweeps Wolf, and he's just like, "See ya, buddy. I'll see you in a little bit. You have a night," and
Yep.
he's
Him and his twinner are a lot alike.
yeah, they are. Um, so can we talk about the chapter title and how this must have been like the perfect chapter title within the whole book? I mean, Jack and Wolf go to hell, like metaphorically, like three times during this chapter, because they're already in hell at this like sunny, lot. Then they flip and find out that this location is exactly where like Morgan has all these slaves, and basically if you fail to be a slave, he just kicks you into the pits, kind of thing. Um, I don't know if we're ever like specifically told what the pit is like inside. I don't know if it's like natural or if it's something Morgan did. Um, yeah, yeah, what about this chapter? Title. How?
Yeah, it's very accurate. That's what I was wondering too. I was wondering if the cult leader there knew anything about flipping over to the territories. Like, how did they get this kid over there? Did they give him to Morgan? Did Morgan show up and flip him himself? Does he have other people that can flip back and forth and take these kids over there? Like, there's got to be some mechanism there when Morgan, he doesn't necessarily have to be there the whole time for all this, but somebody has to be able to flip. And you think
Yeah.
that shows you where the fucking buddy that's running this place is an idiot.
Well, you see a lot of. I mean, even Sonny himself, like just the fact that he's allowing these kids to run most of it. Yes, they're
Yeah.
like indoctrinated to his, but he just doesn't have a good system laid out for the. I mean, they're following the indoctrination, but it's
Yeah.
it's like
It's like
there's
he's
no plan.
brainwashed himself, right?
Yeah,
Sonny is the leader of the brainwashed.
but it's like you talk about one thing and the other, and you talk about like, I mean, they flip, they go over into this hellscape of a situation. They see people they recognize, and they're like, oh shit, these are their twinners. Like he sees Bass, he sees, and then they see what they do to Ferd, which it pretty much reminds me of like the opening to the Silent Hill movie, and that dude just ripping the skin off that girl, kind of thing. Um, no, but then they go back and they're presented with one of the worst, like Christian, like, hells they can realize, because they're accused of, participating in these, homophobic situation, kind of thing.
Right.
And it's like taken over by the where like they go back to the kids, and they're using the kids to, relate this rhetoric. Oh, y'all were doing stuff in the bathroom, and then y'all are supposed to be cousins, so it's incest too. And hey, Bud Files, thanks for
Hey.
stopping by.
Yeah.
Um, and then we get to the whole like, Bass, like, because we'd already seen Wolf kind of, overpower Bass, and then Sonny shows up with the syringe, and you're like, oh man, this is
And
gonna
it's like,
turn
why
out
does he
kind of
have
cool.
drugs? Why does he have a syringe and all this stuff? Like, Jesus, like they're hitting every single freaking metaphor of all these
like the
situations.
creepy tropes. And
Yeah,
okay, and the great thing is, right past this, we get all of our explanation for it. We're told that this is all backed by the state, that it's not only a health, medical, and psychological program that backs all this. So society would have like the straight jacket, which we see, the syringe,
yeah.
like.
You start thinking of a mental health situation where these white halls and these doctors running around and drugging everybody. And
And technically on the outside, just to remind you what it's supposed to be, is it's supposed to be like a safe haven for kids that don't have a home, like that maybe they're orphaned, or they chose to leave their family or something like that.
yeah,
uh,
it's supposed to be a
it's
safe place.
supposed to. So chapter 26, and for people out there, this is one of the most hated chapters within Stephen King's mythos. It's also one of his most beloved, but it can go either way, and it,
Well, it
it
starts
just
off horrible and then it gets good.
ah it I we're gonna get into it. But all right, so chapter 26, Wolf in the Box.
Hmm.
Jack wakes up in the straitjacket. Jack overhears that Wolf is back in the box. We flip to Wolf, and Wolf is howling and thinks of going with the moon. As he thinks this, Wolf starts to fully change. The last thing we hear from that moment in Wolf is basically that he reminds himself that he has a lot of teeth, more teeth than normal. Teeth.
And strength,
So,
strength, strength.
yep. So we flip back to Jack, and thinking Jack is still knocked out from, his syringe thing. Um, Sonny goes about his business. He makes a phone call to Morgan Sloat. It's revealed how deep this goes. Asking about Jack, he learns Jack's real identity. Sonny proceeds, going over how much he is making off each individual kid within the Sonny home. In Sonny's office, Jack notices his stuff and Wolf's. Sonny notices Jack is awake and admits he knows his true identity. In the kitchen, Rudolph hears loud thuds coming from the box and decides it's time to go have a bathroom break. Smart man, Mr. Randolph. Um, the box opens. Wolf is out.
Violently.
Yeah. Um,
It's a
back to
a
Jack.
steel box, so you can
Yeah,
imagine what this
it's
guy is
made
doing
of
to this
steel and
thing.
lead.
Everything is steel, and he just violently rips it apart.
So back to Jack. Sonny asks Jack about the territories and wants to know Parker's location, or technically Parkis's. Sonny burns Jack in the kitchen. Two boys hear scratching at the outside door, but at the top of the door, which is over 7 feet tall. Sonny burns Jack's other arm. And technically, he's not burning his arms. He's burning like in between his fingers.
Yeah,
Um,
the webbing there with the lighter.
mhm. um, let's see. Sonny asks about Jack's items from his pack, to which Jack claims they're all what they seem to be. Wolf decapitates a boy who opens the kitchen door, runs past the other boy, leaving that boy's head for him. In Sonny's office, Sonny hears something and sends a guard. Heck Bass is sitting in a confessional when Wolf Hulk busts through the door, kills the guard Peterson instantly by ripping out his spine and eyes.
Yep,
Um,
total predator mode.
he sees Bass in the corner. A guard runs into Sonny's office claiming a dog um, pack is loose in the home, commotion in the kitchen and in the common room. Using the touch, Wolf finds Jack's location from Jack. Sonny arms himself with a pistol. Wolf kills Bass, like literally, like, I mean, he does put up one arm, but
Yeah, it goes right through him like
yeah,
nothing.
that arm's like instantly, yeah,
He
ripped
ripped a
through.
steel box open. Human flesh is going to be nothing.
Yeah, I love how King presents this
Yeah,
situation where
you get a good picture.
Bass is complaining about having to be like in the confessional or whatever, and then after Wolf like Hulk busts through the door, like he's like, man, I wish I could be bored again, and then he dies. uh,
Careful what you
uh,
wish for.
a guard Peabody calls the police. Wolf, struggling to keep control of the transformation, finds the route to Sonny's office. Wolf proceeds with caution. Sonny is informed police are arriving and tells his guards to deal with him. He is heading to see Morgan and cannot miss this meeting. He leaves out a back door, leaving guards Casey Warwick, Andy Warwick, and Sonny Singer with Jack still in the straitjacket. Jack convinces the guards that Sonny left them to deal with the cops. They realize Jack. They release Jack from the straitjacket, and Wolf leaps into the studio. In doing so, Wolf activates Sonny's recordings like at full blast, kills Casey, decides to shoot. No, 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 no.
No,
Okay, so he kills Casey, and then when he kills Casey, Sonny decides to shoot Jack. He's going to shoot Wolf, and then he's like, no, 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 the brains is Jack. I need to kill him. So he turns the gun on Jack instead of Wolf, but Wolf is instantly between the gun and Jack, taking 2 bullets through the midsection. Sonny shoots Wolf again, but Wolf tackling Sonny. Jack uses the radio and bolts him in the head from behind. At that moment, Wolf grabs Andy and throws him at Sonny Singer before he can shoot Jack. Wolf walks over and rips Sonny Singer in half. Wolf start and literally like Sonny goes up like this, and Wolf grabs his hand and like this
there's his
part of
arm.
his body,
Just,
and
yep.
it's pretty great.
Yeah, it's pretty
You talk about
descriptive
just
about how he gets ripped into pieces.
just the
Yeah.
strength of going
Yeah,
to
there's
that.
just like a bloodbath. This is like the Chainsaw Massacre you were talking about.
And we're talking about this is after he's got 3 big holes in his midsection. I mean, we're talking about like one of them is described as like a couple inches. Okay, so Andy throws him at Sonny before he can shoot Jack. Wolf walks over, rips Sonny Singer in half. Wolf starts changing back into human form, now really dying. Andy Warwick takes off. Wolf checks on Jack, claiming he protected the herd, tells Jack to go on without him. Jack, with tears rising up, tells Wolf he did and that he loves him. Wolf literally disappears, like legit,
Yeah.
literally
Yeah.
disappears with only a blood outline left behind. Jack weeps as he leaves. Um, so I do have 3 monitored questions for this lovely, wonderful chapter. And this chapter is huge. I'm talking about like most chapters in this book promote like, about like half a page. No, this is about 2 pages worth of information that went into this
Oh, yeah.
chapter. It's about an hour long to read normally. That's how big this chapter was. So one of my first ones is going to be kind of my personal opinion, but one of the best chapters within all Stephen King's mythos, like hands down, it's one of my favorites of all time. Um, how great is this chapter in your mind, comparatively to everything that you've read from King?
Yeah, and I agree. And the reasoning why is because how this chapter played out is what I wanted to have happen in my head. So as I'm reading through it, I'm going, come on, Wolf, change and just fucking massacre these pricks. And then it happened, and I was like, yes.
You talk about
It was very, very thirst quenching.
you get everything you want out of it and a realistic ending to it because like even though it's not, and that's when I said this is one of the most hated things that comes from our dear friend Wolf passing away.
Yeah,
It is
that
one
was
of
sad.
the most hated moments within King's writing. Fans hate that he killed off Wolf, but it's also a super impactful death in my mind. Like I can remember reading this, and we're only with Wolf a short period of this journey, but
Yeah,
like how important of a character he was
he
within the
was a hero.
small, yeah, and like and this, and having him in. on this scene right here, from what he was having to go through, being stuck in this box, it's not like Jack's just seeing him dying. No, it gets to a point where, Wolf is telling him he's dying, and we, the reader, know he's dying, kind of thing. So you just feel for this guy and getting this, like getting him to, like, because when we get to the box, I thought we were literally just going to leave him in the box and he was going to wither away and die. So getting this whole, like, him whole bursting out of the
Oh
box, using
yeah,
this immense strength, and it's not this dumb rampaging Hulk, which I love because we kind of got that when he changed into a wolf. He wasn't dumb; he still had an intelligence, but there was, I will say, like a dumbness to his hunt. He was kind of just after food. This is Wolf in control
this
of
is
this werewolf.
revenge. This is
Yeah,
revenge, retribution, and not just for Jack, but for all those kids in that school too, from what he'd seen, and then what they saw in hell when they crossed over. That poor kid getting sliced in half with a whip. So when he goes through there, yeah, it's a reckoning that's happening here.
yeah, and who by
Him
too? It's
fading, I
by
thought, he's going back to the territories. I thought that was a nice, appropriate death for him to go back, and I pictured him materializing back in the territories and passing away, somewhere nice. But it wouldn't have been nice. It would have been in hell.
that's the
Would have
way
been the
I
pit.
envision it, but I envision it a little differently, and we're because we kind of know from another, um, the whole reason we're on this show talking about a gunslinger reference, because I
Yeah,
believe
Jake.
I believe that this is what it looks like to go to the clearing. When they mentioned that, after most of our heroes, that's, their far away off version of the afterlife. I want to say that this might be how every, like, if Roland were to die during the pages of, any given book, that this he would have had an Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of,
Fade away, become a
yeah,
force
just his
ghost.
clothes remained, and um because I believe in my heart that's what we were seeing is Wolf going to the clearing. He didn't necessarily flip back to the territories, which in all reality he probably did. He probably
Yeah.
flipped over the territories,
Well, at
and
least the body, but I like what you're thinking. You're saying there. I get that. That's
I,
cool.
I,
But he
that's what
flipped
I
over and he flipped everything, like his clothes. Like his clothes didn't get left behind or anything, did they? They didn't describe that
no,
anyway. They just said a bloody outline and he completely disappeared, including clothes, everything.
yeah, everything was
It
gone.
was just a blood that was left over. That's it.
So, okay, so that was more an opinion based, and for those of y'all that have not read this book that are listening to them, this by far is, I mean, it's just fantastic because you go through and it's like action packed, and
Hmm.
then you have to go through the death kind of comes out of left field, and it's such a realistic death because even as you're reading it, the narrator tells you that movies got it wrong, that it doesn't take a silver bullet to kill a werewolf, that it could just be a regular gun, and like the action, the saving Jack in that moment, him being instantly there to take those bullets, the whole line, it's say I protected the herd, I
Yes.
love that line, like
And it's
him
not
looking.
just sad because he died, but now Jack is alone again,
Mhm.
right? And I was thinking right away, I'm going, Jesus, now Wolf's dead. Like, what the hell is he going to do to get out of that place, right? I know it's
And
pretty
it's
much open for him to escape now, but Morgan's on the way. So it's like, Jesus, you got to get the hell out of there, kid.
and also at the end of this chapter, it's this heavy realization of this small amount of time that Jack got to spend with this really good individual, and it's like all the times he was shitty to this good individual is like what he's immediately faced with as we're leaving out
Yeah.
of this chapter
Regret.
is like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all the times that he shamed Wolf for being a little lower on the intelligence level,
Yeah.
or the times he wanted to abandon him because he was a hindrance on the journey, kind of thing.
Yeah.
um all right, so a legit question. So if Sonny was always working with Morgan, which we do know he was, why did he not call Morgan right away when Jack and Wolf first ended up there? Why was it this like 2 weeks? And actually, by this time, it's been a month. It's been
Yep.
a month. Because it was explained that we were supposed to be at this 2 week thing and they were trying to escape, and then we get to this chapter and it's explained, nope, that never happened. It's like 2 weeks past that when this happens.
Yep.
Um,
So a full month they've been there.
So why didn't Sonny call? I mean, and he knew that Morgan was looking for a boy, and has the kind of description of Jack. Already has this facial concept that he knows Jack. Like, why did he not call Morgan? I mean, how dumb
Well,
is
we're learning about how dumb he is. This was one of the realizations when we realized this guy's a fucking idiot. That he
I go
didn't
back,
call him,
it's
but
like,
maybe they get kids all the bloody time in there. Like maybe this is a regular occurrence, so he's not going to call Morgan every single time he gets a kid, but he is doing a monthly check and telling them how much money they're making and all that. So
that's
that
what it
happened.
is.
So
He's
maybe he
basic.
just said, okay, it's just another kid, and well, I'll let Morgan know when we have our monthly phone call or meeting or whatever. So
I want to say it's like that, but I want to say there was like maybe there was other reasons because he couldn't remember who Jack was, and he
and it was
should have
driving him
remembered.
nuts. And it was
Yeah, and
driving
like
him
maybe
nuts. And he didn't want to be embarrassed telling Morgan about this kid and not knowing who he is. And then Morgan saying, "This is the kid I'm looking for." And he go, "Oh, geez." And then he'll feel like
now
an idiot and he's embarrassed, which he
now
is.
we are now we are trying to like work our mind of no, this guy is dumb. Like, so, I mean, even though he has like kind of a smart thing set up, I want to believe this is set up by Morgan's intelligence and Sonny's just running it because Sonny's just he's kind of dumb all around. Like even the way he preaches the Christian, I mean, it's like everything he quotes from the Bible is usually wrong or twisted, and it's that culty type of and it's not necessarily like he doesn't understand it. And
He's just
that's
manipulating
exactly
it.
it. He doesn't
No, he
understand it. And,
doesn't. He's not getting the
um,
truth of it. It's manipulated, twisted, which is what
all
he
right.
is.
So just another maybe convenient coincidence or maybe super intelligence. I'll let you be the guide. But how convenient is it that our major bad guy has in the real world a runaway home set up for runaway boys, which he just happens to be looking for a missing runaway prince slash boy. How super convenient is that in the middle of his American trip? Um, that this is just set up here because I want to say that's kind of one of the biggest flaws for this whole thing is that it is so heavily connected to Morgan because
Yeah.
it's just super convenient that this is here in the middle of like Illinois, not anywhere near California, not anywhere near New Hampshire. And it's like, why
He could have
was
gone in
this?
any direction and completely avoided this place. Like, I mean, yeah, I know that one bothered me too. But then at the same time, you're thinking, okay, what's the scope of Morgan's freaking empire here? I think Morgan's empire is a lot more vast and bigger than what we actually think it is. And
And as a
Morgan's
story,
brain is just compartmentalized to think more, and he never even he might not even understand the scope of what he's got going on there.
and
So
as the
maybe
story
there's
goes,
other, yeah.
as
Sorry.
the story goes, we do know that the scope gets bigger as far as his dealings within the real world. And I want to attribute it to you're exactly right. Like maybe Sloat doesn't exactly know fully all the things that he's in charge with, and I think that ties in with the Sawyer's campaigns because it was a joint family project where these three companies were maintained. So it kind of makes sense that he had shadow dealings in his real estate stuff and then use shadow stuff within Phil's and losing control kind of thing.
Yeah.
What's up, Matt? How you doing, man? Hope you're doing okay. I haven't seen you in a minute. Um, all right, so I will say the first time I read that I cried like a baby when Wolf died. Like the way
Oh yeah.
it's not an easily it's perfectly like King does the right amount of time with the moment of grieving you need before he moves on from the character kind of thing. It's well represented and it's such a perfect death kind of thing. But let's move along because we're gonna get into some other good stuff too. So we got chapter 27. Jack lights out again. Jack sits in Sonny's office for a good moment grieving, but hearing people, and this was briefly touched over, but at this moment, like while the wolf thing was going down, police had already arrived and were at the scene and already finding like stuff in the kitchen, like they had already found the decapitated teen. Um,
Following the
when
trail. Yep.
Yes, and when we get to the whole wolf dying in that situation, the cops are actually getting like closer to they just it's an awkward situation where his office is not exactly like easily to get to on purpose. Um, Okay, so Jack is sitting down there kind of grieving for this moment, but here's people drawing forward, and it's the police. He collects his and Wolf's stuff and heads out the back door leading to the backyard. There he sees the broken box, which Wolf broke out of, witnesses some of the police investigating. He leaves the Sunny homes by simply walking out the front gates, um, saying he loved Wolf. 3 miles later, Jack takes in his freedom and then hitches a ride with the trucker, taking him to mid-state Illinois. Jack falls asleep, and that's the end of this little interlude chapter. Um, Again, it's kind of a perfect setup to an already perfect chapter, and I love the irony of like we spent like a month with Jack in this home trying to figure out a way he could escape, and he literally walks out the front door, with tons of police and detectives and more.
Even
Eh,
more guards.
yeah,
And you figured, I thought right away, like all these cops that are showing up here are part of the corruption, and he was
yeah,
going to have a hell of a time getting out because they're part of the cover up and they need to keep this place protected, right? And I thought, Jesus Christ, if he gets caught by these guys, that's going to just be it for him. They'll just.
It's one of those things that I mentioned where it feels like the story was going that way, and King's like, "No, we're gonna go this way. We're gonna make it easy," because I kind of felt the same way that like these cops that were gonna show up were just gonna round the kids back up, and they were gonna be stuck there for a little longer, kind of thing. And it's not like that at all. Where these are just generally good cops, and this is all a surprise to them. Not only, actually, before we go more into this, that this pertains to my question for this because for giggles, describe this police scene to me. If you were a cop getting to the scene, how would you describe this to your superiors, kind of thing, or to anybody, or because it's not just one room they'd have to deal with. I mean, we're talking about like Wolf went through like most of the bottom part of this home. We know he killed people in like three separate parts of this home. The
Yeah.
box alone, how do you explain the box? But how do you explain any of their
The
deaths? Like,
damage of the to the bodies. Like, how do you explain these bodies being torn apart? Exactly. Like, holy shit, you're going through there, and the cop would be trying to imagine in his head something rational, like a guy walking around with a chainsaw or some big weapon that would cause this damage to a human being. They wouldn't think of anything supernatural. They're thinking, what weapon did this person use to cause the damage to all this stuff, including that box? Right. So that box, they're thinking, use some kind of, again, something to get out of that thing. Or
and the irony from the reader's scope is reflective for both because we get some of that from the guards as they're going through it because the guards like they run into like Rapace and they deem it to be like they see it as these pack of wolves kind of thing or pack of
yeah,
dogs,
yeah.
and it's literally just Wolf moving so fast he's seen as multiple like dogs or
Or
whatever.
their fear in their brain is trying to
Yeah, it's
rationalize it like, oh, I'm being attacked by a pack of wolves, but you can clearly see that's one big giant supernatural thing killing me. Right.
yeah, yeah. Hey Carmen, thanks for stopping by.
Hey, Carmen.
Um, And this is very graphic, Carmen, what we were talking about. So, I mean, you don't have to stay around because it's not for the, faint of heart kind of thing. Um, no, but it's so reflective because we get it from the guards, but then we go through not one chapter with the police, but then the second chapter with the police, and we don't get any knowledge of how they, scope this, or we don't get any kind of conversations because the way Jack kind of skirts around them, we see them, and they're investigating and kind of like looking into this. And we do get some stuff later on, like news clippings and stuff like that, once it gets to like Richard. But it's kind of ironic that we don't get anything from the police in the situation, like some of their firsthand, like what their thoughts or for like, oh God, like what are their first reactions
Yeah.
to this would have been. I don't know. It's just if I like reading this whole scene, and I love that chapter, but just reading how that scene played out, and I like it's so movie-ish how the whole thing plays out, like where I could see this in TV form or in movie form, and like
Yeah, and I
I
thought of
could
the
just
howling as this is happening too, right? So it's
yeah that
the kind of
that
tearing
type of
apart thing.
werewolf.
Yeah.
Oh, it was so good. Um, so chapter 28, Jack's dreams. Um, Jack dreams of the clearing, and that's the way I wrote it. Okay, because that's what he's doing. All right, and that is my perspective. Okay, so and Jack dreams of the clearing, and Wolf is free. But Jack feels immense shame for all the times he tried to abandon his friend. Jack continues to hitch rides through Illinois, and he's replaying the events that led to Wolf's death. Eventually, picked up by a man named Miles P. Kiger, who gives Jack a jacket, drops him off at a diner, and also gives him a newspaper that has the article about the investigation into the Sunny home. Says they found 5 decomposing bodies, which relates that they had other people there before this event, dead kind of thing. He hitches a ride to Springfield and dreams during travel first that he needs to see his cousin Richard Sloat tomorrow, and the second of Wolf and Jack separated and Wolf cannot reach him. The dream flips back to the studio where Richard is switched for Wolf and Richard is dying and blaming Jack. Jack wakes thinking of Richard. Um, Not really any questions, and it's kind of a great another great like grieving. It's a moment we get to grieve with Jack kind of thing, and I mean, and rightfully so. He's kind of doing the right type of grieving because he's going through all the doubt and the shame that I mean, if you go back to my previous episode, us talking about this, it was one of my questions about, Jack's treatment through Wolf throughout all this, him being a new, person in our world, and Jack giving no F's and no explanation about anything, in relation to Wolf. Um, Now, also a lot of the dream, because I interpreted it to be the clearing, but a lot of the way King describes his version of the clearing is exactly how we're with Jack and Wolf in that situation. So that's why I named the clearing. Um, Step moving along. Chapter 29, Richard at Thayer. Um, at 11 a.m. the next day. Wait. I did want to go back. Because there is this situation with, and I did write his name down, Miles P. Kiger. We do get the situation where it's like we get another homophobic, like, hitchhiker situation.
Mm.
But it's the first time in the book where it's not the dude. The dude's actually being like really nice, and Jack is hallucinating this whole like gay fling that he thinks is happening, but it never does happen. It's really weird when you read it because it reads as like it is this homophobic situation with the hitcher, and it's not. It's just Jack kind of in his fears and going through his griefs, and he's already like hit this a couple times on the journey, so he's just imagining this to happen. I love this situation because it's not really explained why the hitcher drops him off, but you kind of get the situation where like Jack was creeping him the F out because Jack was in this vision of him like um because it's never explained why he because he's supposed to take him like to the other state, and he basically stops the journey and he's like, yeah, here's a diner, you'll find somebody else, you'll be good, yeah, I'm leaving, bye. And Jack doesn't really understand why the guy just kind of left him, but I do like that situation. All right, so
Yeah, I
back to
found that one weird too, but I thought maybe what King is doing there is he was trying to introduce a kid who's going to be gay, and he's coming out and he's trying to get his feelings sorted out. So
I
is
kind of
Jack
thought that
gay?
too. I kind of thought that too, and then when we get to the Richard situation, I thought it was going that situation too. It doesn't, but I kind of felt that too as we were reading it.
Yeah.
It never does happen, but
No,
okay,
he
so
doesn't explain, but it alludes to it, though, doesn't it?
it does, especially because that's where his thoughts go to it. And it's kind of a weird, like, especially because the times that it has happened, they've been nonchalant and not dangerous. And, so why would your mind immediately go, more like a PTS type,
Yeah, or
Um,
maybe it's a situation where he's neither for neither team, just not interested in it, period. So then he just takes people at face value. He loves both male, female, whatever, but he has absolutely no sexual desires for anybody.
I mean, I could go that way too because it's not presented as he is. He's just trying to help Jack out. I mean, he gives him the jacket. There's no, affirming
No, it goes
like,
neither way.
no, I don't know. I don't know what King was trying to, or Peter for this. I don't know.
I don't know
Um,
either.
all right. So chapter 29, Richard at Thayer. At 11 a.m. the next day, Jack makes it to the Thayer school, makes it to the quads, and knows Richard is in the Nelson house. Making it to the Nelson house dorms, he finds Richard's room and sees him reading a book near the window. Jack gets him to open the window. Richard is a little taken back at seeing Jack. Richard is about to go to class but offers Jack a shower and rest. Jack asking for food, to which Richard demands he answers questions for the food. To which Jack agrees, Richard asking if this was Seabrook Island stuff. Jack says yes, and we learn about a joint family vacation to Seabrook Island. The last visit was directly after Jack's dad had died, both families trying to raise morale, but the trip ended in complete silence. Seabrook Island stuff is a term to represent silence, as in we don't discuss it. Seabrook Island stuff. When you first read this, it's a term that comes off as like they would be discussing like if fantasy stuff came up and you're like, oh, that's Seabrook Island stuff. That's not how this term is used. This term is used to represent like an item that you absolutely don't want to talk about, and you're not going to talk about it, is what that means when Richard says it. And technically it could be used both ways because Richard is completely anti fantasy, anti like um, but technically, every time in the book when they reference the Seabrook Island stuff, that's what it means. It's just a moment when Richard relates back to that family vacation when they were supposed to be raising morale because Jack's dad had just died, and it resulted in the other outcome where everybody was silent and grieving the whole trip. So they used that term as like, that situation. It's a term of silence. Um, so Richard comes back with food. We learn next door to Richard was Rule Gardner, Sonny Gardner's son, who just left to return home due to an extreme situation, which we're not privy to. um, Jack explains his trip is to save his mom. Explains his 30-day horror story at the Sunlight home. Then Jack tells Richard the whole story from start to finish. Richard jokes at first, but he believes most of the story, albeit the fantasy parts. Tells Jack he can stay the night, but somehow they'd have to get Jack back home to New Hampshire, which Jack kind of states that he's not really from New Hampshire, he's from California. Um, but that's where that chapter leaves off. So, um, yeah, out of all the places that you would pick to go, why would you go to your enemy's son's place? We know the main villain at this point is Mr. Morgan Sloat. Like, and I understand this is family, and I understand that you had a connection with this kid like 6 years ago. Um, but that was before you found out that your uncle is a big bad, Mama Jamma. Why would you go to his son's, school?
I don't know, but I'm thinking, it's
Hey, Tink.
Gina, Euro genus. I'm thinking because they just been friends for so long, and of course Jack's got the touch, right? So he knows that Richard is nothing like his father. If
I want to
anything,
say
he's completely opposite.
I want to say context clues in the book and in relation to what they relate to us. Yes, that's the motif that, it's not just family, that it's kind of like Jack's only friend because he was the secluded life and vice versa for Richard kind of thing.
And I think King's kind of pushing an ulterior motive here, like don't judge the son by the father's sins,
Yes,
kind of deal, right?
I
Like
want to
the kid
say
doesn't necessarily going to grow up and be exactly the same as him.
I want to like admit how like tough of a choice it is for Jack to go to another friendship so close after losing like such a strong friend like Wolf. How do you even bring this danger to someone you see as a friend slash family member kind of thing? From a writer standpoint, to me, it's just something touchy. It's something that you would space space out for a little while, and we go like right there kind of thing. To me, it adds to the horror, of what Jack's already facing on the journey, and we see not for no re not for no reason kind of thing.
But it seems
Because
almost like, because Jack loves Richard so much and he wants to save him from the horror of his uncle or his father, right? So I'm thinking that it might be somewhere deep down in that side too that Jack thinks he's doing a noble thing trying to save his friend. I don't know. That's a possibility there.
I'm
Just
gonna
don't
say,
know.
I'm gonna say that you're exactly right, and we know that that is like one of the background hidden themes of the book. It is some sacrifice, which we've seen, some saviorness, which we're gonna see. Some retribution, which we've seen. There's a lot of things. But yeah, I could say that you're 100% right. This comes from a salvation type of thing where, like, he's kind of seen the evil that Sloat is, and maybe in the background he knows that this is somebody that he loves and wants to save, kind of thing. Even though this dude he didn't want to be saved.
Right.
Um,
But he just lost Wolf, someone that he didn't think that he would, be love this character or love this person, right? And then now he's going to lose another one.
mhm.
It's that could be that kind of motivation. Plus, it's on the way too, so it seems like it's very convenient.
It is.
Something right in the path again, right? Like beautiful.
And this isn't a
Almost like
made
it
up
was written
place.
this way.
And this isn't a made up place. There's a town called Thayer in Illinois, and it not only has multiple schools, but there is an Illinois, prep school.
It's legit.
Thayer, yeah, it is and it's a prep school for the elite, and we already know that our boy Richard would be at an elite prep school, kind of thing. So, chapter 30, Thayer gets weird. Next day, Richard lends Jack some clothes, which is basically a school uniform. Um, he heads to basketball practice, comes back late with a story. Afternoon classes were suddenly canceled, and students held them. Then students were held, then allowed to finish classes, which for him was basketball practice. Richard goes to basketball practice with a sub coach that looks greasy and smokes all the time. Doesn't know anything about basketball either. Jack asks if it's possible to see the news to check out current events, and that's where this chapter leaves off. Um, did you have any thoughts about this cancellation of the schools and this greasy smoking basketball player?
Yep. I thought immediately that again Morgan's empire and how vast it is and how he has spies absolutely everywhere and it's just growing and growing. So I immediately thought to that because it didn't. There was things not making sense there. So
It
I'm
was
thinking,
another
yeah, of course,
moment.
he would be protecting his own son,
It
surrounding
was
him with
another.
an entire army of his people, right?
It was another moment where I just wanted to slap the shit out of Jack. And
Walk right into a trap, right?
I've cursed a lot this episode,
Yeah,
but this moment right here, I was all like,
three
I
times.
mean, I mean, yes, on one level, I understand like Jack's thinking and reasoning, but like,
Fool me once, fool me
especially
twice,
after hearing the
fool me
story,
three.
he still doesn't connect the dots that the whole school is like set up for Richard's protection, and like, yes, there's a heavy connection to the territories at the specific spot,
Mhm.
um which we're going to get to. So chapter 31, Thayer goes to hell. And they're pretty spot on with these chapter names. I can imagine reading
Yeah,
this for the first time and reading this chapter name and being like, oh boy, I'm in for a
yeah.
mess.
As soon as I
Um,
read that, I went right to that. Like the way it played out was again exactly the way I thought it in my head. It's like as if Stephen King is freaking like reading all of our goddamn minds
yeah,
about how we want this to play out. Either that or we're such like-minded people that we can figure out how
that's our
we're going to
first
play
like
this shit out,
go-to.
right?
I think that is because like Stephen King's been known to write children's like really well and how they think and move and stuff like that. And he's also able to generally write these things where he doesn't leave you too much room for yourself to think outside the box, kind of thing, because it's
Yeah,
generally what you would do. He doesn't like writing those horror stories where you're yelling at the screen the whole time. It's the
yeah,
opposite.
exactly.
And this he does an excellent job with, because it kind of I mean, as you're reading this, you're already thinking like, man, I bet you it's gonna go, and it does exactly
Exactly.
with some
Flip.
twist, I will say. While Jack and okay, so chapter 31, Thayer goes to hell. While Jack and Richard are talking, their school gets extremely quiet. They start to investigate the dorms and find finds a room that should have kids, but no one is there. And they left so quick that their joint was still lit, pretty much full joint. Um, they went to the specific room because Richard knew that there should have been kids there and they weren't. As they're traveling, and this is kind of like briefly touch base, but there's no kids there. There's no kids in the dorms. There should be. This is after hours. And all of a sudden, and this reminds me of like a Silent Hill situation. Um, they're not really in the regular school at this moment. The whole school has flipped, and they just don't know it yet.
And they
So
don't
let
talk about any kind of mechanism that caused this and how this, and that made me think even more of Morgan's Empire. I'm like, holy shit, he's got an entire school that can flip. That all
well
the
they
grounds, like everything there flips.
well they kind of do. They kind of do explain it, and Richard knows exactly, and neither Jack or Richard puts the clues together. But I'll lay it out when we get there.
Okay,
Um, so all right, where was I? Where was I? Okay, so
they're exploring
um,
the school.
they found the joint. It's still lit. Richard looks out a window and sees a bunch of kids around a statue of the headmaster. These kids are going to remain to be important, although I do not name them all off. Um, but they're standing around the statue of the headmaster and they're smoking pot. Richard believes he knows the kids. Jack asks for him to take a second look, but Richard knows, and he opens the windows, gaining the group's attention. Now revealed to be morbid twinners of the kids Richard thought he knew. The group asking for Sloat's passenger, damning, damning Jack for bringing this upon him. But finally coming to terms with Jack's story, he asked Jack to close the window. And coming to terms with Jack's story is just like a loose because he really never, not really. Um, yeah, but this whole situation, I mean, okay, so and it's not here where we're going to find the answer, but and it's not really explained forefrontly that this whole school flipped, but that's exactly what happened. They go back to the room. He's talking to Richard, and all of a sudden, there are some chimes. We know what chimes are.
Yes, we do.
Um, and then all of a sudden, all around them, they can't hear anything. None of the kids are around. The school itself looks like everything's been damaged, like somebody like Wolf has been running around, like breaking everything the way he did in the Sunnies. Um, then there's more, and we're about to get to it. So, chapter 32, send out the passenger. Make sure I didn't have any question. Um, Jack is barricaded Richard's dorm room, which I love this part because as it's happening, Richard's like, that doesn't go there. And he doesn't understand like the complexity because what they're basically going through is like a zombie horde. And Jack kind of understands this. And Richard's still in his little, like,
He's in denial.
yeah,
He's what a normal rational person would shock, that doesn't believe in this and wants to rationalize it, so he comes up with his own narrative,
Yeah.
right? And we see this
Um,
with Richard over the next several chapters, all the way to the end.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Basically, he's trying
It's
to
gonna
rationalize this.
it's gonna get thick in this chapter because
Hmm.
yeah, because Jack is barricading his room, and Richard's over there complaining about like where those things are not supposed to go because we find out Richard is very much a child of organization. He kind of lives based off that. Uh, Richard kind of ignores all this and eventually goes to sleep, and Jack kind of continues to do, barricading and preparing for the worst kind of thing. Richard is woken about 5 minutes later with screams of, "Slow, give me your passenger." Richard, believing he is hallucinating, the twinners start throwing rocks through the windows, convincing Richard everything is real, but he's starting to have a mental breakdown, screaming for his daddy. Jack has to slap him out of it, actually twice. Jack grabs Richard and they head into the hallways. Passing the common room, they notice that everything is damaged. They move upstairs looking for other kids, but everything is damaged on the second and third floor. But the third floor, it, not only is it damaged, but it's caked in sweat. They move to the bathrooms, which they find are, as they get closer to the bathrooms, extremely hot, like a sauna, and wet from all the showers being turned on, and it's just the hot water. Jack loses Richard for a moment. Richard finds a room with food, and they eat. Jack asks Richard if he knows what's going on. Richard has excuses to explain what's going on. Jack scolds him for being blind, and a rock smashes through the window, and that's where this chapter leaves off. Um, so pretty much that's what's going on. Is Richard is like slowly coming to terms, and it's exactly what Steve. I mean, he's trying to come uh, to terms using rationality where rationality does not exist. He's trying to explain, that the ghosts are flying, using fish wire, and
Yeah.
there's a hand in Big Bird, in Big Bird that's controlling the, and as we're going through, his explanations are kind of getting slimmer and slimmer because he's struggling to explain what's going on.
So then
But
he goes to sleep, right? Because then that's his other
yeah,
mechanism to
shut
rationalize it,
down
shut
and
down, right?
ignore.
His brain shuts down. Oh, it was a bad dream now, right? So that's the last resort.
He's like, no, this isn't going on. I'll just stop. There's not rocks going through the window. I'll just go to sleep. And 5 minutes later, rocks start coming through. Because they're in a different room. So he believed that that was just something that was happening in his room, kind of thing. Um, no, but I love this whole like, you know, because that's really what it is. It's like Jack showing up to this kid, and kind of like loosely explaining, at first loosely explaining what's going on. And then
Yeah.
after some shit goes down, like basically, Jack sits him down and finally tells him the whole story. It's something I've been wanting him to do with a lot of people. Like, I mean, you have the time, sit down and explain this, and it would go a lot faster. And we know he likes stories, so what the F, Jack? But he does explain this to Richard, and Richard has the ultimate other outlook onto this because we find out that like he knew about all this before. Like we see this moment, like, oh, let's get in there. Let's get in there. So chapter 33, Richard in the Dark. And you talk, I mean, all these chapter names are perfectly
Spot
titled.
on.
Jack tries standing up to and his name is Elfridge. It's going to sound like Eldridge because that's exactly what they're going through. Some Eldritch horror. I love that he named this dude Elfridge. Um, okay,
Close
so
enough.
Jack trying to. He tries standing up to the Elfridge twinner using the Queen's name, which does cause the twinner to twitch for like a second, like, but for a second, and it's not just him because there's a group of these kind of zombie twinners outside. I want to say it's not clarified, but if I had to guess, it's like 5 or 6 of them, something like that. But in this chapter, Elfridge is the one who's doing all the talking and the back and forth. The Elfrid's twinner tries talking to Richard, telling him things could go back to normal if Richard gives them Jack. The thing attempts different vices to convince Richard. Richard relates a past and to relate this, Richard actually, there's a bunch of moments where Richard's like, "Yeah, I could do that. Hmm. Yeah, yeah," and Jack actually gives him the opportunity to choose, whether listening to these guys and Jack not really realizing that these guys are kind of like just saying exactly what Richard needs to hear. They know this kid kind of thing, and they know how he operates, and they're saying exactly what you know. We know you like structure, just give us the kid and you can go right back to your little box, buddy. Um, so the thing attempts different vices to convince Richard. Richard relates a past story where he is 5 or 6. His father goes into a closet. Richard waits for him to come out, but nothing is, his father doesn't come out. 15 minutes pass, and Richard decides to go into the closet. Instantly, he starts smelling sulfur and fire. The boards that he was standing on are now black earth. And as seeing this black earth, he notices that bugs are crawling all around his feet. As Richard is calling for his dad, something green with bright yellow eyes with tentacles grabs his arm, and he does manage to free himself, pushing himself outside of the closet, which this thing continues to come outside of the closet after him, but decides to not do so and heads back in. After this, he bans fantasy and had forgot about this until now. Jack, hoping this would snap Richard back to reality, does the opposite. They wait, daytime, and sleep midday. Richard finds out he wasn't dreaming and breaks his glasses, refusing to see. Also, refusing to discuss plans on how to even escape because he doesn't admit that any of this is going down. Richard goes back to sleep, wakes up, sees mold on the walls now. Jack explains they need to go during the middle of the night, that's going to be their best opportunity. And as discussing this, bugs start coming out of the fungus slash mold. With this, they finally do move out. Jack spies a way out towards an old train station known as the depot. We get a very descriptive story about what the depot is and what it used to be, related by Richard, as it is very important to the school that he goes to, and it's part of his whole belief and structure and non-fantasy type stuff. As they make a run to the depot, they are chased by it's werewolves, but it's wolves, dogs, and it's related through both Richard and Jack, but it's werewolves. As they cross the depot doors, Jack and Richard fled. And that's where this chapter leaves off. Um, so my explanation on what this is exactly in that explanation that Richard gives us about the depot. And Jack kind of puts it together, but doesn't. So this would be the main hub that Richard set up once he went and started moving technology. And Richard even says that it's a train hub, and Jack even references, oh yeah, they did use trains, and there would be a hub for these things. So with him integrating like technology like into the territory, this is the axis of locations where he was sending stuff out to the territories using trains. So like it makes sense on why it's so guarded and why Richard's going to school there too. Like it doesn't really explain because it makes it sound like Sloat was kind of using the train in the real world, which he is not. He's not at all. He's just using that depot to flip over to that location, and the trains are set up over there, kind of thing. Um, but that's why like this whole like school is set up with nothing but bad people. And I wouldn't even say it's necessarily set up for like his son. I think it's more set up for the operation type of thing. Like and like it, because there's never an explanation on why the ghoul slash twinner things can't go into the school.
Yeah,
Like
like why didn't they just come in and get them? Because that never that one bothered me too. Like why didn't they just break in and grab them?
it's
Why they have to
noted in
stay
it
outside of that building? Why didn't they enter that building and get them?
the way the book references it is they are restricted, but the way they reference it is his relation to Wolf when he turned into a werewolf and he met those like two sites that he couldn't
Oh, we
enter.
couldn't cross. It was like
Uh,
Holy Land almost, right?
yeah, okay, so like my theory, and it's not it is referenced in relation to that, but it's never outright stated. But my theory is that because it only applies to the Nelson house, that his father actually has some kind of
He
barrier.
set it up so that he
Yeah,
wouldn't have the werewolves going after his kid by accident or
because
whatever.
and my reasoning behind that is because the whole school we did. I mean, it's not just students that the twinners are there. It's not just the teachers that we know that even all the way up to the headmaster and everybody that works in the school works for
Works for
Slope on
Morgan.
some
Yeah.
yeah on some level, whether they're guards at the pit or kind of thing. So like it kind of makes sense on why and a kind of relation why he would have that one building guarded off because he's not there all the time, so he can't guarantee that his son will be safe. How do you do that? You set up in on
And your
top of that,
magical shields and all that stuff.
on
That could
top
be
of that,
another reason why Jack went to see Richard, is because Richard would also be the only one probably in the world that he knows would believe his story, because his dad's involved in that and probably thought at some point in time Richard must have seen the territories or understand how his dad's doing things, but he didn't
well, you're
realize how much he had sheltered him.
well, you're
Or
exactly right with that because we do find out in this chapter that that Jack did remember that story about you know, that there was a story. He didn't know the story, but he knew there was a moment when he had seen his father go into a closet. That's all he knew from that, but he knew there was that moment. So he was hoping so you are exactly right that he was hoping that that one story and it happens throughout like these last two chapters where Jake keeps hoping this would snap him into it. This would, and because the same thing reflectively happened to Jack as he's been on this journey. He did
right.
remember these things as he was going, like about what was it, the handyman that got electrocuted, the two different
Yeah.
kidnappings that happened. It was the
That was
journey
one.
that was sparking these memories. Because these are clues he needs to figure out. Richard is one of the big clues. Um,
Yeah. And then Richard would be his ally, and he'd actually have somebody who's an ally that understands what the hell's going on here and can flip.
And it's another, because I mean, besides, and we already know that Parker is not from our world. He's more, from the territories. But this, I would say, was like the first centralized character that Jack has gotten from our world that's kind of journeying with him, kind of stuff. And it's kind of a different outlook. It's one thing to have Wolf over here, but he was from the territories, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's like, for me, it's a different perspective and companion, like on the journey, kind of thing.
Yep.
You know,
Huckleberry.
yeah, having someone that's more relatable kind of thing, like, and someone to awe and freak out, when you do flip, kind of thing.
Kind of shows you Jack's character, where he needs to have somebody to take care of during all of this. Yeah.
Well, we do know that that is like a underground motif of this is that Jack really can't do the journey on his own. He does a lot of it, but like he does have that I need to be mothered. Because we do get I mean, we start out with his mom. He gets Parker. I mean, you can call these things mentors and stuff, but it is kind of a motherly figure, kind of thing. And that is his goal. He's trying to save his mom and go back to his mom. So it's not to say that he's not pining for that kind of thing.
No.
But we are at our 2 hour mark. We made it past like another, I don't know, 12 chapters, something like that.
Big chunk.
Yeah, and we still got a big chunk to go, pretty much. But this is the last part of the book. Is this part that we're about to hit? Because
Yeah.
next up we got interlude, Sloat in this world, Oris in the territories, part 3, and that right after that leads us into like part 4 of the book or whatever.
A long
Um,
train ride.
Yep, and it's a lot of good of the book because this is pretty much where all the like action and
Yes. This is the stuff that you really wanted to have happens.
yeah, and it's taken us a long time to get here, but I mean, I do love this journey, but there is a lot of journey to this journey. You know what I'm saying? You gotta put in the miles before you get into the good stuff.
Yep. Jack will be a changed man by the time the end of this.
But as always, I want to thank you, Steve, for doing this. I always love these, breakdown discussions that we have.
Oh
We always
yeah.
paint new pictures, and hopefully, some people watching this are like, hey, I didn't think of that, or it just opened my eyes to something else. But
Absolutely.
I want to thank everybody that stopped by, everybody that watches us on the rewind.
Yep.
As always, please please comment, let us know, especially correct us if I'm stating something wrong, or maybe I'm saying something too right. Let me know, but guys, we will see you back in 2 weeks, hopefully for the last episode of this book. I'm hoping. I've looked at what I have broken down, and I think we could. If not, I don't know. But until next time, guys. Pleasant days, long nights, all that good stuff. Thank you, Thine, and we will see you later. Bye.